Welcome to Chapter 3 of Book 3 of The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. This chapter is called Of the Rise and Progress of Cities and Towns After the Fall of the Roman Empire. After the fall of the Roman Empire, those in the cities and the towns were at about the same level. In fact, those of the town lived a pretty difficult life, having to travel around from area to area in an attempt to sell goods. So how is it then that the inhabitants of the town were able to arrive at liberty at a much sooner time than the inhabitants of the country? The answer lies heavily in the difference of history that unfolded over the town and over the country, and specifically, who was ruling over the town and who was ruling over the country. The system was set up as such that the burghers were sort of in control of the towns, and the lords were in control of the country. And above both of them, we have the sovereign, or king. The burghers hate the lords, and the lords hate the burghers. But the king hates the lords. So guess who becomes best friends? Now the king has incentive to build up the power of the burghers to offset the power of the lords, who are sort of a threat to the king. And this leads to a certain amount of power and independence being allocated to the towns or cities. These areas of the town or cities became so independent that they sort of operated like independent states. And sometimes they became pretty difficult for the sovereign to control. For example, they became difficult to tax. In some nations, they even went as far as to break free and actually become new states. Not in England, though. In countries such as Italy and Switzerland, in which, on account either of their distance from the principal seat of government, of the natural strength of the country itself, or of some other reason, the sovereign came to lose the whole of his authority. The cities generally became independent republics and conquered all the nobility in their neighborhood, obliging them to pull down their castles in the country and to live like other peaceful inhabitants in the city. In countries such as France or England, where the authority of the sovereign, though frequently very low, never was destroyed altogether, the cities had no opportunity of becoming entirely independent. They became, however, so considerable that the sovereign could impose no tax upon them, besides the stated farm rent of the town, without their own consent. And like independent states, they were able to protect themselves from outer threats, regulate themselves internally, and even erect militias. The inhabitants were therefore less vulnerable in the city than in the country. In the country, they were not able to establish for themselves the same amount of protection as those in the city were able to. Farmers suffered from constant pillaging of their farms and general lawlessness, and this affected them. Men in this defenseless state naturally content themselves with their necessary subsistence, because to acquire more might only tempt the injustice of their oppressors. On the contrary, when they are secure of enjoying the fruits of their industry, they naturally exert it to better their condition, and to acquire not only the necessaries, but the conveniences and elegancies of life. As a result of this, industries which created goods beyond the necessities, more luxury goods, were created in the towns long before they were created in the country. If an inhabitant of the country is able to acquire some extra stock, they are not going to use this to create some additional industry in the country for fear of pillaging. They are much better off hiding that stock away and saving it and waiting for the opportunity to escape to the town. And the laws of the town were such, with general hatred of the lords, that they really didn't mind hiding away some of the inhabitants of the country from the lord. So after only a year of hiding, they could come out and live their life as they wish as a new inhabitant of the town. Now you might be thinking to yourselves, because we read the previous chapters, how can life in the town be so wonderful and fantastic without the natural cultivation of the country. How can there be a major disparity? It is still true that the inhabitants of the town must acquire all of their means of subsistence from the country. But let's not forget that so many towns are located near rivers. So it is coming from the country, but we didn't say it was coming from our country. The inhabitants of the town can acquire their means of subsistence from the whole world. A city might in this manner grow up to great wealth and splendor, while not only the country in its neighborhood, but all those to which it traded were in poverty and wretchedness. And as a final portion of this chapter, Smith notes that every big country has some kind of manufacturing, including poor countries. When people of Smith's time are saying that country has no manufacturing sector, they are actually referring to no finer goods manufacturing sector. However, in every big country, the majority of things like clothes and household furniture are created in that country. And the development of foreign trade can be categorized into two different categories. One we will call violent operation. This is where the manufacturing springs up for the intended purpose of foreign trade, when a demand or opportunity is seen. And the second category we will call natural development. This is where the gradual refinement of manufactures occurs. And this is the type of manufactured goods that must even exist in the poorest and rudest of countries. Think household items. So, the gradual improvement of the household items. And the manufactures are first used for the surrounding neighborhood. The improved cultivation of the land improves the manufactures, and both bounce back and forth until they develop to a phase that now they are used to also refine and develop more distant lands. Well, that concludes Chapter 3 of Book 3 of The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you to our Patreons forever and ever. Please hit a like or a subscribe or a comment. It all helps us with the algorithm. And I will see you next week for the next chapter.